In today's lesson, we will look at specific paragraphs in both texts where the characters help someone. We will then answer the questions, how are they similar and how are they different? Today, our focus for reading is to compare and contrast a topic from two different texts. For this lesson, we will be using this graphic organizer to keep track of our thoughts. If you notice the categories on one side, we'll be looking at the similarities in both the characters as well as certain events in the story. We'll also then take a look at the differences we notice between the characters and the events. Let's first start with finding the similarities between both our characters, the Scarecrow and Peter. Paragraphs 6 through 13 of How Dorothy Saved the Scarecrow. Did you speak? Asked the girl in wonder. Certainly, answered the Scarecrow. How did you do? I'm pretty well, thank you, replied Dorothy politely. How do you do? I'm not feeling well, said the Scarecrow with a smile, for it is very tedious being perched up here night and day to scare away crows. Can't you get down? Asked Dorothy. No, for this pole is stuck up my back. If you will please take away the pole, I shall be greatly obliged to you. Dorothy reached up both arms and lifted the figure off the pole, for, being stuffed with straw, it was quite light. Thank you very much, said the Scarecrow, when he had been set down on the ground. I feel like a new man. Let's take a look at some of my underlining and explain why I thought those were important. Because I know that I'm comparing the Scarecrow to Peter, as I was reading, I was trying to think of similarities along the way that I might remember to compare both of them. In paragraph 7, I underlined the part where Scarecrow spoke. This tells me that he's not an ordinary Scarecrow, so I jotted that down under my thoughts box. Then, jumping to paragraph 11, I noticed that this is the part of the story where the Scarecrow asked for help. So that's something that I jotted down because I'm pretty sure I remember it in Come Away, Come Away. There was something about the characters helping one another as well. Then in paragraph 13, I noticed again how Scarecrow was super polite and thankful for Dorothy helping him down. So again, I jotted that down in my notes box. So let's take a look at what I have so far. I wrote down that he is not an ordinary Scarecrow because he talks. He asks for help getting down, and he is very grateful for Dorothy helping him. Paragraphs 27 through 38 of Come Away, Come Away. I wasn't crying about mothers, he said rather indigently. I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, I wasn't crying. It has come off? Yes. Then Wendy saw the shadow on the floor, looking so draggled, and she was frightfully sorry for Peter. How awful, she said, but she could not help smiling when she saw that he had been trying to stick it on with soap. How exactly like a boy. Fortunately, she knew at once what to do. It must be sewn on, she said, just a little patronizingly. What's sewn? He asked. You're dreadfully ignorant. No, I'm not. But she was exulting in ignorance. I shall sew it on for you, my little man, she said, though he was as tall as herself. And she got out her sewing bag and sewed the shadow onto Peter's foot. I dare say it will hurt a little, she warned him. Oh, I shan't cry, said Peter, who was already of the opinion that he had never cried in his life, and he clenched his teeth and did not cry, and soon his shadow was behaving properly, though still a little creased. Perhaps I should have ironed it, Wendy said thoughtfully. But Peter, boy-like, was indifferent to appearances, and he was now jumping about in the wildest glee. Alas, he had already forgotten that he owed his bliss to Wendy. He thought he had attached the shadow himself. Looking back at our text, I know that I want to find similarities between Peter and the Scarecrow. One of the events that I underlined was in paragraph 27, where it says, "I can't get my shadow to stick on." That tells me that Peter is not an ordinary boy because I've never seen a shadow detach from someone. And I know that that is a similarity between him and the Scarecrow. So I jotted that down in my notes. The next thing I looked at was in paragraph 35, where Wendy offers to help sew on Peter's shadow. This again shows me that a character helped Peter in this situation, as well as we know that Dorothy helped Scarecrow in his situation. So these are two similarities that I'm going to leave in my thought box to add to my graphic organizer. Let's take a look at our graphic organizer before we start looking for differences. In the similarities, I first focused on the characters of Peter and Scarecrow. I jotted down, both Peter and the Scarecrow are unusual. Peter is a boy without a shadow, and the Scarecrow can talk. We found both pieces of evidence in both of those texts, so that I can leave that in my graphic organizer. Now let's look at the events that were similar. I wrote, both Peter and the Scarecrow receive help from people they have just met. Now take a look at what we were trying to find for our differences. There were two differences that stuck out to me between Peter and Scarecrow and how they received help and what they did after they received help. I like the fact that I can use the same key events from finding my similarities in order to find my differences. I think that's a great strategy to use. It doesn't work all the time, but you can definitely use the same details. So I'm going back to paragraph 11 again. Here we see that Scarecrow is the one that asks for Dorothy to help him. Then at the end, again in paragraph 13, we know that Scarecrow was very, very thankful for this help and made sure Dorothy knew of it. Now let's take a look at how Peter received help and how he reacted once he did get the help. I know that Peter is not the one who asked for Wendy to put on his shadow. It was Wendy who offered it. Peter seemed like he knew everything, so Dorothy was the one who stepped up to help him. Then, thinking about how he reacted, it was very different than how Scarecrow acted when Dorothy helped him. Peter did not think that Wendy did anything at all. He almost forgot that she was the one that helped him. He acted as if he was the one to fix this problem. So already that's a huge difference between Peter and Scarecrow and how they reacted once they received help. Let's now look back at our graphic organizer. Taking a look at our differences, I wrote down for the characters, the Scarecrow asks Dorothy for help, while Wendy volunteers to help Peter without his asking. Then, the event is the Scarecrow reacts gratefully, while Peter at first takes credit for what Wendy has done for him. Wow, give yourself a pat on the back. You did an amazing job with this unit. You practiced finding key events, describing characters, summarizing, and even comparing and contrasting different texts. I am so excited to start our next unit. Can I give you a hint? If a natural disaster strikes, these would be the people in charge to help. Do you think you know it? Stay tuned.